Hello, my name is Joseph Casal, and I will be going over my user story in detail. First, I will go over my story in Mingle. My user story is, as a PI or principal investigator, I would like to update the calendar with events. The acceptance criteria is the PI will be able to visit the Create Events page by clicking on the Create Events button that appears on the menu bar when you're signed in as a PI. The event created cannot be for a past date. The system must store the event information in the database because it will be used later on to display a calendar. And finally, once the event is created, the system automatically sends an email to all the subscribers. Below are some tasks accomplished during the development of this user story. I will now go over the diagrams relevant to this story from the documentation. This is the use case diagram for the announcements subsystem. PI is the only user that can create an event, and all the other users can view the upcoming events, faculty, student, and PI. Now in the sequence diagram, we can see exactly what happens when the PI wants to create an event. They select Create Event and fill out the information for the event in the HTML view. From there we call Save Event in the controller. The logic of the controller is we first need the emails of all the subscribers in the database. It's returned from the all function in the subscription service. Then we attempt to store the event information by calling the create function in the event service, which in turn does a post with event data to the model in the database. And that returns a message that will eventually be displayed on the view. Finally, we call the send email function in the mail service and pass all the emails, and that will give us whether it was successful or not. And in the end, we just display the message return, whether it failed or succeeded. The last diagram I have is the class diagram. As you noticed in the sequence diagram, in order to implement the story, I needed the view, controller, service, routes, and model. I have three controllers: a date picker controller for the calendar selection tool, a time picker controller to select the time, and finally the create controller that will call the service. The service does a post to the routes and will use the event model to attempt to store the event in the database. I will now go over the code. Let's start off with the HTML view. I am using Bootstrap's date picker and time picker classes. I am also storing the event name and description or message here and here. Once the submit button is clicked, it calls the save event function in the controller, which I will go through shortly. And finally, ng show message, which can be a successful or failure message. As I said before, I have my main controller, the event create controller, and the other two time picker and date picker controller. I am also using three services which I specify here: event service, mail service, and subscription service. The mail and subscription services are not implemented by me. The event create controller's function save event will first make sure that the user selected a date in the calendar view. If they haven't, the message to print will be this. If the date has been selected, we continue to check the time. Once everything checks out, we call the create function in the event service, passing the event data that the user input. We also need all the subscribers in the database, but as I said, I don't implement that. I just call the subscription service and we get the list of users. Here we construct a list of emails to then pass into the mail service. Once we have all the email data, we just call the service and update the print message accordingly. Now in the service, all I'm using is the create function, which receives an event data object and passes that to the RESTful API post call to this route/events. Now in the routes is where I'm finally storing it in the database using the event model. All we say here is when we route to /events, which is the route we just looked at in the service, we have this post, get, and delete functions. I only implemented and used the post, however, which receives the event data from the HTTP request, the name, the message, date, and date time, and saves the event in the database. For the HTTP response, we either send the error we got or event created. Now this .save is in the model called event. The save just stores a JSON object with these values of these types. And that was a complete run through of the code for creating an event. A way I would improve this feature is to add a way to create events for the specific group you are in charge of. Because right now, there's only one option, a global VIP event for everyone who is registered or subscribed. This concludes my reference video for create events. Thank you for watching.